Hello and welcome back to another out of spec detailing video. Today we have a little bit different video because we have G from TESBROS here to chat all things wrapping Cybertruck. So G, you've had the opportunity to wrap how many of these now?
Three, and then we got two more coming.
Ah, very cool. Yeah, so you're kind of in the trenches, if you will, of getting the first batch of Foundation Series Cybertrucks out here. And the reason I wanted to bring you on is, I was down in Austin, same time you were wrapping these previous two trucks, and I went on the detailing aspect, trying to figure out the stainless steel. And I think that's going to be a big topic of discussion for us today. But I wanted to, bring you on, talk the nuances with wrapping Cybertruck, because I think a lot of people's preconceived notion is, oh, it's easy. It's a square box, basically. And I've heard from you, some off-camera discussions that that's, definitely not the case. It's a little bit trickier than just slapping some vinyl on there. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of people that, I kind of went into this saying, oh, I love the stainless steel. And then after I came back from Austin,
Mhm.
went through all the videos, editing process, and I'm like, stainless steel is a pain in the butt to deal with. I kind of
Yeah.
have this feeling that the Cybertruck is going to be one of the most wrapped vehicles we've ever seen. I mean, all the trucks we're seeing online are going tons of different colors. So, yeah, give me your impression so far on your thoughts about the stainless steel on its own, and then kind of the wrapping nuances.
Yeah, so personally, I think when we first saw it on the release like 4 years ago, we're like, wow, this is going to be so awesome. But historically, there just hasn't been a lot of stainless steel cars, right? Most of them are metal and they have primer and they have paint and a clear coat. So when you think about it, you don't really think about, oh, I wonder how it's going to be detailing or wrapping it. So I think that's one of the first things that everybody was like, this is going to be so easy to wrap, so easy to do, and all those things. And when I first wrapped it, the first things that I noticed was kind of like what you're talking about, like the fingerprints. It was so bad. Like I don't even have oily hands, and I would leave fingerprints. And then like if you don't get it off like right away, it just kind of like stays there for a good bit, and then you have to use like in your video, like use like barkeepers or like the Windex, and you gotta use all these things, but like it's hard to keep it maintained like that, right? So, um, I think it's gonna be wrapping is gonna be the number one option for people, and then on top of that, I think people are gonna ceramic coat it with like Geon PPF or or G Technique Halo or those vinyl based ceramic coatings. But as far as wrapping it, I think people are right. Like it's a lot easier because of the fact that it's flat. Comparatively to like let's say a Model Y or a Model 3, it's not it doesn't have any like compound curves. They're all straight lines. And even if there's a band, it's still kind of it's very polygonal. So squeegeeing it isn't that bad, but you got to make sure that you're in a like a climate controlled place because I think because it's a steel, it holds a lot of that cold a lot longer, so it makes it a little bit more challenging to squeegee if you're working with vinyl. And then the other challenges for wrapping this is going to be the edges because normal edges are a little bit thicker. This steel is a little bit thinner, and also it's where it was cut during manufacturing, so it's a little bit more rough around the edges. So you gotta be really really patient about folding over those edges. So and it's even more difficult if you're doing like color PPF or PPF in general. So I think there's some easier aspects of it, obviously the flatter areas, but at the same time you're going to be spending some of that time that you're going to spend squeegeeing into the edges.
That yeah, that's a great point there. And you and I have had conversations about how different the material is with heat and cold. I had the truck that I was working on was outside in basically cloud cover the first day I was there. Second day we had quite a bit of sunshine. It is truly unbelievable how different this material is, and it heats up like crazy, the stainless steel that is. And you were telling me you were having some issues. It was definitely a little chilly in Austin when both of us were down there.
Yep.
And you're like, yeah, you really have to. The best way to wrap this thing is to basically leave it in climate controlled shop overnight, kind of heat it up as much as possible, and then go in and wrapping it. And you were also saying the install is kind of funny when you're wrapping, because a lot of times you have to get back behind the film with your fingers or hands to pop some stretch marks, or where you kind of wrinkled the vinyl up, and then you're dealing with those fingerprints getting under there. Now, a question I have for you, G, is how does the vinyl actually stick to the stainless steel? Is that a concern of yours, or does it actually seem like it sticks quite well versus like a normal painted surface?
As far as it sticking, it did not have any issues whatsoever. Once it's stuck, so most vinyl, like 3M and Avery, will have something what you have to do after the end of it. It's called post heating. And
Yep.
what you're doing is you're killing the memory of the film, but also you're kind of like setting it in stone, right? So once you do that, man, it's hard to get it off. So I had to get it off a few times when I was doing R&D on the car, like the first car that we did. And I was surprised about how aggressive it stuck to the stainless steel, because that was actually a big concern of mine. I was like, I wonder how it's going to stick, and it did not have any issues.
Great. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I expected. It seems like, yeah, everything just the material is, I called it porous in my videos, which is actually the wrong
Mhm.
word, but the reason I
Yeah.
was saying that was because of how the fingerprints would just stick in there and it like soaks into the material. It's such a
Hmm.
wild finish on the actual stainless steel. So yeah, my findings, I'm kind of at the point where I've got a lot of customers reaching out to me and said, "Hey, I've watched your videos, and do you think this is something, if I want to keep that bare stainless steel, that is going to be a pain in the butt to maintain?" And my answer is 1,000% yes. I think this is going to genuinely drive a lot of people nuts
Hmm.
with the stainless steel. It's kind of funny because we got some documents that Tesla released on actually how to clean the stainless steel, and it does seem like
Hmm.
it's somewhat similar to the paint, but they're talking about like, oh, you can't leave bird droppings on there or bugs for a long time or dirt and
Yeah.
mud. Meanwhile, this is supposed to be a bulletproof, scratch free material, but you're kind of having to baby it, which is a little odd. And I think, for most people, didn't really think that was going to be the case. So I really see a ton of people wrapping these. And, one of the points I wanted to bring up was the edges, as you've talked about. So I know you've done the Cybertruck two different ways. So you've done a bulk wrap, basically, where you take a large piece
Hmm.
of vinyl, you cut it out, trim it, and then you've also created a kit for a DIY kind of beginner folk that I do want to talk to you about more in this, how you kind of came up with that and the nuances with that. But the edges on there, I notice they're all seem to be a little bit different. They almost seem to me to be kind of hand filed or something like that. Some of them are
Hmm.
really rough, some are a little bit smoother. The doors,
Hmm.
obviously, as we have seen, are thicker. So my kind of assumption was a lot of guys are going to struggle having edges stay down. I know you and I discussed too, as far as PPF. Do you think PPF is going to have a harder time sticking to those edges versus vinyl? And kind of what's your approach there, specifically working with the edges?
Yeah, you definitely need to use heat during this process, and some people I think have said to even sand it down in the edges or something like that. I've heard some shops do that. But
Mm,
it's just being about being patient and really using heat, and then um, sometimes it'll pop back up, and then you just have to use heat again and push it back down. So sometimes it'll be a little bit cumbersome, but it's one of those things that I guess I'm used to dealing with a thicker edge, so it's easier to kind of wrap around, and then you kind of just cut right to the line. Like you're
sure.
now talking about like half of that, so you just have to be a little bit more careful. And I think, like when you're doing like detailing jobs, I'm sure you do like the inspection. Like I would probably do two or three inspections on the Cybertruck before I let it go out, just so I can see the edges and making sure that nothing pops up. But once it sticks, I think it'll be fine. But like you said, it's a matter of like there's a lot of variability on those edges. Like some of the ones I see it and it's like super sharp, you know,
Mhm.
and then some is like a lot softer, you know. So it just depends on where you're working with.
Exactly. So getting into kind of the weeds here of, when you actually are vinyl wrapping or doing PPF. So are you kind of recommending going all the way around the edge to basically the backside of the panel, or are you kind of cutting it somewhere on that kind of rough edge, you will?
Yeah, I think like our kit, just because we're dealing with beginners, goes
Hmm.
around a little bit more, so it has a little bit more surface areas. Some areas will have far less space to do that. So, for example, like where the headlight is, it's a little bit tighter in that area, so you won't have
Sure.
as much space. But like the rear quarter panel, you have spaces all day. I mean, there's so much where you could wrap around. So it just depends on the area. But like certain things like the reason why I think PPF is going to be a little bit more challenging is it's not as easy to get the edges down. That's why when like
Hmm.
shops do it, they use templates and then they could charge a lot less compared to like a shop that does full bulk, full edge, no edges at all showing, and you're going to pay a lot more premium for something like that. So I think even though we're coming out with this kit, there's going to be shops who's going to be super busy with Cybertrucks because that's what they want as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. And, I guess one of my questions would be for you is, do you kind of prefer bulk wrapping these, or do you prefer like the more DIY kit? Because I think there's going to be a lot of people going either ways. I've even been thinking, because we're going to have a lot of customers around Northern Colorado area here getting Cybertrucks. And I'm like, maybe I could get into wrapping these. And I was, again, under the impression, these things are going to be a lot easier. I am an absolute novice, very much a beginner when it
Uh-huh.
comes to wrapping, nothing like you are. So I
Yep.
know bulk wrap is probably preferred for a more professional sense, but the DIY kit, to me, I was watching a few of your videos, looks like it has a lot of nice coverage. It's a very simple or more simple installation, if you will, on having the
Hmm.
sheets cut out because I think one of the things with PPF and vinyl is a lot of the install really comes down to edges. A lot of people can get like
Hmm.
the middle of a hood done, but then you have edges peeling up, and that's where a lot of the issues come in.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that now that I've done both, I would still go the template. So even if you
Mm,
see like I saw a video from like OC Detailing and they do amazing work too. And if you look at like their process too, they kind of already made a template for themselves where it's kind of sized to fit. And the reason why you do that is it's just significantly easier to handle film that's kind of cut around like the fender. You know how the fender has the wheel well like this, like the
yep.
trims? It's just a lot easier compared to when you just have a rectangular piece and then you have to cut it. So I think like we eventually might come out with two versions. Like one, we might call it like the shop version, where you do have experience with vinyl. We'll put a little bit more margin so you could have a tab so you could kind of fold over it a little bit more and get more coverage. But then we're also going to have like the beginner friendly version, where it's going to be almost like 98% coverage, but you're going to have that 2% non coverage to make it a lot easier for the beginners in mind.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So actually I talked to you, we've got a customer out here that's kind of 50-50
Hmm.
on, doing a wrap on a Cybertruck. So I think what we're going to do on this is I'm going to get a kit from you. We're going to make a video on it because, me as a beginner, I love learning. Vinyl is its own beast in general, compared
Yeah.
to what I do in paint corrections and ceramic coatings. Like they're two totally different fields. I think everybody thinks one detailer can do PPF vinyl and all of this work and tint, but it's all such a different process. And
Yep.
yeah, I think that's really interesting. I am surprised to hear you say that you actually like using the templates. I would have thought, you would just love bulk wrapping, but on this, you're not stretching and shrinking quite
Hmm.
as much as a normal car. Like you said, a front bumper of a Model 3 that becomes very tricky, especially when you have a template and something to kind of grab onto to stretch and shrink and get really lined up in the right spot. And yeah, I think that's super cool. So tell me, G, a little bit about your kit because I'm curious how the heck do you design a kit like this? If you don't mind sharing this, if this is like, insider information, but I'm just kind of curious how you go, okay, this is a kit, we're going to make these edges like that. There's probably a lot of trial and error, I would assume, in that, correct?
Yeah. Yep. So there's several ways. We've been doing this now. It's crazy to think almost 5 years. So we've kind of developed
Wow.
many processes. And there's a lot of ways we do this, but typically, we can start with like a 3D scan of the vehicle, and this one's a pretty easy card to scan. And then from then on, we could 2D it, flatten it. This one really doesn't need as much flattening just because it's already flat. But we do have a software that could pretty much read the bends and then flatten it in a way that would fit, if that makes sense. So once you
Wow.
get, it's almost very similar to like textile patterns. So textile patterns is very similar because we're working with a body that's 3D, but then textile, like when you actually seam like t-shirts and stuff, it actually has to be 2D and then you have to sew it together like that, right? So
Mm.
there's a lot of similarities between vinyl and textile. So like once we have that, it is all about like just because you have a 3D scan and even though it's super accurate doesn't mean it's going to fit because there's a lot of variability in the vinyl. And because we're dealing with beginners in mind, we try to design it with the mindset that it might stretch a little bit more than we want to. So that's when we start putting like backing paper cuts in certain areas so that we can control how much and where the beginners stretch. And then we just test the crap out of it. I mean, nonstop, and then, I hope it fits, right? And then we kind of come up with a plan before we start doing this, and then once we have like a prototype, we got like beta, then we have like our employees install it that have never installed vinyl. It's funny because like my wife used to be that subject where like she would install all my other kits before in the past like when we first started the company. So we still do that tradition where they're going to be installing it themselves. And then I just kind of like observe and then try to see what I can improve on. And then, uh, all in the background while we're doing this is, when I come out with this kit, we first came out with like the do yourself PPF kit, for example. I realized that kits have been around for a long time, but the do-yourself market wasn't strong for the PPF. And the reason, my understanding was that they really sold the product. So when we try to make these products, we're not just selling it as just a template kit, because I think a lot of people can do what we do in that regard. But what we sell it as is this whole community of the course, the support that we give, the expertise, the tools that we kind of vet for you and then find for you. And then we like try to find the best tools and also the tools that we use in our shop already. So it's not like a random, e-commerce company that's like just sourcing random stuff. It's like these are things that we already use and we already have a supplier for. So all in the background, our team is working on that. And then we just kind of package it all together. So we try to create the best experience for the beginner because we want it to be fun.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was checking out your website earlier, kind of, just going through some things. I love that you have courses on there. I mean, you posted a little video on doing the hood of the Cybertruck, and it's
Hmm.
really neat to watch you just kind of step by step show somebody a very much beginner. I mean, this could be your absolute first time ever wrapping something, and I think you explain it in a way to where it's like, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the hardest parts about wrapping vehicles is just understanding how much material you need and cutting it out properly in a roll, because you can get yourself into trouble where you're wasting 10 times more than a professional like you is going to take two doors back to back and be able to cut it out of a
Yeah.
single roll. This is a very, very simple way to do it. And you putting the slits like in the hood, you take out the centerpiece, magnetize
Hmm.
both. I think that is super cool. I also think it's awesome that you're, putting in there, having the actual tools that you guys are using in the shop, because, as a beginner, you're like, what do I actually need? I've been through this process
Right.
myself. I've wrapped some personal vehicles of mine, and you buy these sometimes very expensive wrap tools that you never
Hmm.
use, or they don't work like you thought they would work. So I think that's really cool. And having a dedicated courses. So my understanding, G, is once you purchase this kit, you have access to this network of
Mhm.
courses on like how to do each panel.
Yeah, so we go through it in three stages. It's going to be foundations, and then, the actual panel installation, and then after that, it's like post maintenance, like ceramic coating and stuff. So it's a full course. The foundation, we actually go through every aspect of how to clean the Cybertruck. So we're going to take some of your tips, Colton, from your video as well, and how do you prep it? We use a degreaser that we've already tested on the Cybertruck, and then you got to dry it, get it all prepped. Drying is a very important aspect, and then
Mm.
after that, some areas, like, it's not like paint, but you should still clay bar it, just because you might have some things on the surface of it. um and then, after that, then we go through every single panel, and that panel order is also important for me because my background is actually, I used to teach at a university, so I studied a lot of ways of how to teach, but it's like we're trying to get them to the level of like confidence to really build up. Like, we go a little bit easy, and then we build it up to the harder one, and then we kind of go into a little like medium. So we really think about all of that experience from start to finish, and then afterwards, it's like, how do you take care of a vinyl wrap or a PPF color wrap, and then how do you ceramic coat it? So it's not just like one course and then after
Wow.
that, like, if you have another Cybertruck, um you can wrap it also, and then wrap it for your family as well.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love that idea. And one thing I was thinking about with having how you're cutting out these kits is if you have a color shifting vinyl. I know a lot of the times
Exactly.
if you flip it upside down, like say you cut one
Yep.
door out in one way, flip it upside down,
Yep.
it's going to color shift the opposite way. So,
Right.
folks who want that, I think that red Cybertruck, it was kind of red and
Hmm.
gold you did down in Austin.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of people I think would struggle getting a bulk vinyl and getting it all
Yep.
to lay up the same way. So I just think it's such a cool service you're offering and a product you're offering to have, everything all in one package. Now, a few other questions I had. So I was watching your video on this. Is your kit, do you have to remove the fenders on the Cybertruck, or are there two different options for your kit in that?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I didn't want it to remove it, but what I realized was, in order to get the right coverage, um, I've removed so many of them now that I was like, this is going to be pretty easy to remove for most people, so I'm just going to tell them to remove it. So they will have to remove it, but they don't have to remove the camera. They could just kind of like set it aside, and then you just need to get in, and then you could put it back right away.
Yeah, and I think realistically, it's going to look a lot cleaner and probably
Yep.
hold those areas down better. So the
Yep.
vinyl, yeah, a couple minutes of work taking that off, and obviously you need to be careful with that, but you've got a full guide on how to remove those
Hmm.
safely in the right way.
Yep.
And actually tucking that vinyl under is really going to help in the future, keeping those wraps nice
Exactly.
and things like that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I do want your thoughts, G. I don't know. Have you played much with like normal PPF on the Cybertruck, like color and or not color, clear and satin at all?
Yeah. So we actually brought satin and or they call it satin matte or and clear when we were in Texas, and it installs great. I think if you put gloss, it does make it a little bit shinier.
Hmm.
But I think matte looks pretty sick on the
Okay.
Cybertruck. But same thing with the vinyl. It sticks really well. It installs really well. The edges are going to be a little bit of a challenge, just like vinyl, but it's similar process. Other than that, it's wet and dry.
Yeah, yeah, definitely wet installs are very different from vinyl. And it's, I've done PPF courses with XPEL and was a certified installer a long time ago. So I've got a good
Nice.
idea of that. And yeah, I put some or some PPF on there and I was kind of surprised how much it changed the look of the Cybertruck. And I actually
Yep.
think a lot of people are going to benefit from doing my kind of solution that I figured out of doing barkeepers
Hmm.
and Windex, and then maybe
Hmm.
even an alcohol wipe down before that, because we're seeing
Hmm.
a lot of trucks coming out of the factory with doors that are completely different colors.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
I've seen
yeah,
that.
so yeah, anything else you want to share on your kit? what vinyls are you using for that? Are there specific brands? Are there specific colors? Can you custom order stuff?
Yeah, so you could do custom orders, but we have a partnership with both Avery and 3M. But what's offered on our, product page right now is all Avery. But let's say
Okay,
you wanted 3M satin volcanic flare, like we can get that, and we have that in stock as well. We're also currently working on some new designs that's custom. It'll be patterns, so we're going to be launching that pretty soon as well. So we're super excited to be doing that. And we're also, we're gonna, based on feedback, we're definitely gonna be launching a bunch more colors as well.
very cool. Yeah, I think this is going
Hmm.
to be a cool one-stop shop. I love the whole community you've created and background knowledge with this. I think it's awesome, and I'm anxious to wrap one of these Cybertrucks with your kit. We'll make a whole video on it, show the install, and see how poorly a novice that thinks he's really good at detailing and stuff is actually going to do on it. Hopefully, I can live up to somewhat of your expectations. But yeah, really appreciate your time, G, and yeah, I think we're going to see so many trucks wrapped. I realistically think maybe 25% of people are going to leave raw
Yeah,
stainless steel, and then they're
yeah,
going to have it for 6 months and go, I'm so sick of dealing with the stainless here.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I
yeah,
agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
awesome. Well,
Thanks for
appreciate you
having me.
coming. Absolutely. Appreciate you coming on, G. And yeah, definitely, you've got a lot of work ahead. I know you've got quite a few orders for all the kits already, and more, I think, as normal customers, not Tesla employees, are actually going to be getting these.
Hmm.
So good luck to you,
Yeah.
and we'll support in any way we can. Everything G's channel, TESBROS, we'll leave all in the link in the description. If you're interested in wrapping your Cybertruck, G's the guy. Definitely do business with him. So really appreciate it, G.